Engagers, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of using games and gamification in our daily lives, for example, to learn what we are teaching. And I am Rob Alvarez. I work at IronHack, teach at IE Business School University, and so much more, and host this podcast. If you have an extra second, please go ahead and subscribe for free to our email list at professorgame.com/subscribe. Hey Engagers, welcome back to another episode of the Professor Game podcast, and we have Tammie with us today. But Tammie, before we take off, are you prepared to engage?
I absolutely am.
Fantastic. Let's do this because we have Tammie Schrader, who is a Science and Computer Science Coordinator at Northeast Washington Education Service 101 for the state of Washington, and she serves 59 public schools in their science and computer science implementation. And she worked recently with the Department of Education and has been a guest at their Education Games Expo in Washington, D.C. She also spoke at the White House Game Jam in 2014. It was sponsored by the Department of Education and the White House, and she has since spoken 6 other times at the White House on computer science, games, assessment, and technology. She's been a moderator, a guest speaker at the SciC, Science is Cool, I'm guessing that's what it's saying, conferences, and does professional development for Washington Education Association around UDLs and science, STEM, as well as game-based learning in education. So Tammie, is there anything we're missing from that fantastic intro that you want to make sure we highlight?
No, I would like to tell you that I'm a second career educator. Before I became an educator, I actually worked for a NASA contractor down in Southern California, working on peacekeeper missiles, shuttles, those kind of things.
So it is not rocket science, is a typical thing that people say.
I say that a lot in my classroom, and I would tell students, you're going to hear that a lot because I know. So that was kind of my tagline, and students loved it. It was great.
Great, Tammie. So talking about, that tagline, your daily work, we would like to know, what is, being Tammie in this week, this month, last time you went to work, whatever that looks like. We want to sort of be in your shoes for a bit and understand what does that look like. What are you doing these days?
Hey, that's a fun question, only because I don't have 2 days that ever look the same. And that was true when I was a teacher as well. But so I work for an organization, an educational service district that serves 59 districts, and it looks like a whole lot of stuff. So when the state of Washington passes initiatives, the recent one being climate science under Dr. Ellen Ebert, what that means is I present a plan to get climate science out into our districts. And that can look any way that my vision allows, right? And there are 9 of us that do the same thing that I do for my region, right? So we collaborate and connect frequently. And one of the things we do is we come up with a plan to serve districts around climate science. And the cool thing that I get to do is my plan looks a whole lot like game-based learning and gamification. And so I get to create programs like that. The other thing it does is I create a lot of professional development for teachers around our science standards in the state. We have adopted the next generation science standards. So I get to do that. It can mean anything from talking to districts to going out and visiting districts. So when I saw this question, I had to laugh because last week, one of the things I did was I actually went out to a Colville school district in our northern region, and I got to tour 4 different industries that are trying to serve students because we're trying to get students internships into schools. So my job looks kind of like I'm legislatively required to do certain things like climate science. And then I get to do other things that I think serves students as well. So am I being clear at all? Like I just do a lot of different stuff. And sometimes that means I'm on calls in the evening so that I can do professional development now that we're back face to face, but it's really been a slow lift getting everybody back face to face, as you can imagine.
Yeah, for sure. And so many things have actually changed in the world, and the world is such a different place in many ways. And remote work is here to stay more than, I mean, it already seemed like it was coming. It's now like really coming. It's like really here in many ways. People are doing, remote work as well, remote learning in many capacities more than before. It's become an interesting place for sure.
Yeah. So I get to do a wide variety of things. So thank you.
Quite a few things. And that is a very good sort of segue into what we're going to ask from you next. And that's, all those things that you do, you're getting busy all the time. And you mentioned the word games-based learning, well, the phrase games-based learning and gamification a couple of times. So we would like to know, what is one of those times when you set out to do something in that space and it actually didn't work very well? You had that fail or first attempt in learning. What can you say about that?
So this is my favorite. This is my favorite failure. And by the way, I have failed a lot, Rob. It was really hard for me to pick one. And I thought, oh my gosh, because you try things and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. So my favorite failure is I was tasked by a company called Filament Games to implement a game called You Make Me Sick. It was my first voyage into, video games in classrooms and learning. And I asked my students, hey, would you guys be willing? They're trying to do this pilot. Do you want to do it? Of course, the minute you say video games to kids, yes, we want to do that. Yes. So I set it up. I got the computers in my classroom and I set it all up. And this game is about viruses and bacteria, which I find amusing now, of course. But what was interesting is the night before I was having like heart issues. I mean, seriously, in my classroom, and I'm a wreck because I don't know anything about video games. When my kids were growing up, I said to them, we're not putting video games in this house. Find something productive to do with your lives, which, by the way, has come back to haunt me. Both of my children are gamers, and it makes me laugh. But anyway, so I'm in this classroom. I've got everything. All the computers are set up. The tech's ready to go. And I'm having just nightmares. I'm just thinking, oh, my God, I don't know how to play a video game. I am going to be asked questions about how to play. Like I can limp along, but I don't know how to play, really. And so what I love is I spent 4 hours in my room that night figuring out how to play a video game, right? That was my whole goal. How do I play so that when kids say, Mrs. Schrader, I'm stuck, I don't know what to do, I can be of some help to them, right? So, Rob, I'll just give you a hint. Guess how many questions I got about video game play? None. Oh my God. See, where were you when I needed you? So the kids the next day, now they had a lot of questions about bacteria and viruses, which, by the way, I have a biology degree, so I could answer those, but there was none. I mean, I'm running around and I'm just, and by the way, I had nightmares the night before. I showed up to class early. I mean, I am just a mess. And they had no questions on video game play. And I asked them later, how come I didn't get a single question? They're like, well, gosh, Miss Schrader, that stuff's easy to us. And I'm thinking, well, it's not easy to me.
Stuff.
So that was my first biggest failure, right? But it was great because I learned that kids have no issues with video play. Like they're hot on it and they don't need me to do that piece for them, which was a great gift to me, learning that, right? Can I just tell you one of my second biggest failures?
Yes, please, because I was going to say that was not like that was an expectations failure more than anything else.
It was a failure. It
went well.
I had no idea. And that was the question, right? What was my favorite failure that actually worked out? So after I learned that kids don't need me to teach them video games, hallelujah and amen, I decided I was going to learn how to play video games because Filament said to me later, hey, would you come be a science consultant? And I said, well, I know science. I can do that, right? So I went ahead and bought an Xbox. And my husband says to me, this is totally true, like I'm in my 50s. He's in his 50s. And he looks at me and he says, explain to me why we're in our 50s buying an Xbox. Like, I don't get this. I said, because if I'm gonna consult on video games, I have to know what they do. Like, I have no clue what they do. And he says, okay, so we buy this Xbox. I said it, well, kids said it's set up in my classroom. And before school, they are helping me. And when I say helping me, I mean, they're trying to coach me, right? And oh my gosh, you talk about failing every day. I bought a game that I knew I could. It was about Harry Potter, and I'm a big Harry Potter fan. And I thought, I can do Harry because I understand at least the premise of the game, right? I mean, at least know what they're trying to do. So anyway, hilariously, they're trying to coach me before school. And at one point, and I said to them, listen, you got to be nice. You got to play nice, because when you don't understand science, I play I play nice. So everybody's going to play nice with me. You can't make me feel like a failure. And they tried, but I'll tell you, at one point I hear and the kids would come in the morning. All these kids would be sitting in my classroom watching me fail. Like, it was hilarious. And one of them goes out into the hallway and I hear her say, hey, you guys, you got to come in here. Mrs. Schrader sucks at this. Which was funny. And then little Destiny at one point, and it was funny because I'm trying to get my character to run up the stairs at Hogwarts. And the kids are screaming at me, jump, jump, jump. And I'm like, I know I'm supposed to jump. I don't know how to jump. How do I get this? I mean, it was awful. And little Destiny smiles and she was being totally cute and sincere. She said, Mr. Schrader, I'd tell you to pick an easier game, but I don't think they make one. and then I had a young man named Liam. He would come in and try to help me every morning. And I would say to him, you can have 10 minutes, but after that, it stresses me out. Like, I literally stress. And so one day the bell rings and he looks at me and goes, okay, Mr. Schrader, I got to go to class now. You need to shut this off. And I just look at him and he looks at me and he just reaches out, takes the controller from my hand and shuts it off. And so later when he's in science, I say, hey, Liam, how did you know to do that? He goes, Ms. Schrader, you could not track what I was saying. I'm looking at your face and you don't even you are gone. You're so it just makes, so when I say I failed, that's my favorite question you asked me. I cannot even tell you how much I failed. Like, oh my gosh, all the time, and loved it, right? Because the kids were so supportive and they were so sweet to me. Ms. Schrader, it's okay. You'll do better tomorrow. Anyway, and I have a lot more of those stories. Trust me, I fail a lot. But anyway, there we are.
That sounds great, and I think it's a cool story of you not necessarily playing games and doing great with games in your classroom, right? Like, after this experience and doing all this, you brought them to a classroom. Your students didn't have any doubts in the gameplay, clearly, and I'm sure that what happened in the end of the classroom was very, very interesting, and the kids learned a lot. And, I don't know if you want to have any quick comment on what happened after. Like, what was the experience of the students? Because, as I said, it sounds like a failure, like internally and to you. But I'm sure that the experience for the kids was at least a lot better than what they used to have before.
Yeah. And so one of my favorite successes that came out of all of that was when they played this first game, they were like, Ms. Schrader, I don't know, this game, I don't like, and they started talking about things they didn't like about the game. And I said to them, well, here's the thing. This company is making the game for you. So you might want to tell them how to make it better. You're the market. And they did. And so every class I had, I think 4 or 5 at the time, I don't even remember anymore. They gave me a list of stuff that they thought they could level up here. Or they could do this, or they could, you know what I mean? You know how kids are. They have suggestions about everything. And so what happened is when Dr. Matt Marino called me, he was the guy doing the interviews. And Matt is steeped into game-based learning in Orlando. He's amazing. He's got programs there now. And he used to be a special ed teacher, which is even better. But anyway, Matt called me, and this is how Matt and I met. And he said, we're doing his exit interview because I had participated in the study. And I said, hey, kids had some trouble with the game. And he goes, oh, I know. I said, well, I got 8 pages worth of stuff that they struggled with. And he said, what? And I said, well, I just asked them. If you ever want to know what kids think, you just ask them. They'll tell you. It's my favorite thing about teaching middle school. And he said, can I have those? And I said, sure. So I sent them off to him. And what was really great is I think they were building 3 more games or 4. I don't even remember. But he said, hey, he was at WSU at the time, Washington State University, which is about an hour and a half from me. He said, can I come out and meet your class? And they can give me tips on the next games before we start building them. And so the kids actually got to participate in their new games and give them feedback. And what was great is Matt came to the room and he said, he told them about video games. He talked about his expertise in video games and games in classrooms. And then he said, hey, would you, help me out? And they're like, yeah, you can imagine middle schoolers. And so what was great is I'm standing at the side of the room and I'm taking notes. He said, what do you think about this, this, and this? And they start feeding him information about how to build a video game or what they think would be interesting in that. You know what I mean? And I'm standing at the side and they would say things that I didn't even understand. Like they were speaking in words like, at the time, I think, level up. I don't even know what that means at the time. Like, I don't even know. And they were using all this vocabulary. And I finally turned to him like, I don't understand. And he sees the look on my face. He goes, you don't need to understand. Just type what they say. So I am over there typing their feedback, which I don't even understand. But what was great about that is afterwards, I say to the kids, what are you even talking about? What does this even mean? And so they're explaining video game jargon to me, right? And that was, to me, a huge success for kids, right? Because now they are getting to actually advise someone who's building the game on how to build the game and what to do. It's great. That was a success, I think.
Sounds very successful. Very nice. Picking up all of that feedback and then maybe seeing at least a part of it being implemented in the future sounds great. Very exciting for you and for the kids, for sure.
For the kids, not for me. I didn't have a clue what they were talking about, by the way.
But now you can look back and understand many of the things they said there, I'm sure. If you look at your notes, it'll be like, oh, okay,
oh,
here
that's
it goes.
what they were saying to them. Yeah, and it was just such a powerful experience to connect them to somebody at a university who went into special ed teaching and now works with video games, right? Like, that's pretty cool for them. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very cool. And Tammie, when you're going to introduce a game to your class, or maybe if you're even going to create a game or some sort of gamified structure for a class or for professional development, as you mentioned as well, do you have some form of a process? Like, how do you do it? Like, how do you approach this?
Oh, that's because I have as many answers for as many PDs as I've done. So it depends on my audience and their need. So I will tell you that Washington Education Association under Annie Lamberto asked me to create my colleague and I, Al Gonzalez, and he works across the state. So it's kind of fun. We get to collaborate together. They asked us to build, I want to say 7 or 8 workshops on game-based learning, game-based learning and then gamification, which you and I both know are different things. So now the audience for that is, I'm just teaching people how to implement games. That's the audience. So when I built that workshop, I build it like, how do I say this? I build it and think, okay, before I knew what game-based learning is, maybe we should define it. And no, I'm not having them read papers on it, because that, that's, if you're going to teach game-based learning, you do it through games, right? So that's what we start doing. We create little games and start really small. Like, those workshops start with games like rock, paper, scissors, because I want to show them that, first of all, you can play games with even little kids. Even my 5-year-old granddaughter, Maisie, she plays rock, paper, scissors with me. So kids can understand rock, paper, scissors at a very young age, right? And the second thing is, I don't have to buy any equipment. We don't have to, and so you take them from small, and then you start introducing other things, escape rooms and puzzles. And then you start looking at other ways. And the other thing that I like to do with teachers is show them ways that they're already probably implementing it, but they just didn't know it. And that's my favorite comment when you do professional development teachers, when they say, Tammie, we were already doing this. We just didn't call it. We just didn't, right? And then you say, okay, now let's expand it to include things like standards, right? Because when I was in a classroom, it's okay to use game-based learning, but I had to include standards, right? I'm tasked with teaching NGSS. I was a 7th grade life science teacher. So that looks a lot different to me than if I just have to implement games, right? I did have a district say to me, hey, Tammie, we just want to do an after-school club. So the cool thing about that is that you don't have to implement the standards, right? You just get to play that, because it was an after-school thing you just wanted to do with kids. And so it depends on the target where I start. So I'm actually doing a presentation at NCCE, which is our technical organization out here in Washington. Well, actually the Northwest. It's not just Washington State. And we're getting ready to present a Minecraft experience for teachers. And that's a lot different, right? Because I'm assuming that if teachers are signing up for something called Minecraft in education and how to use that they come with a little bit different knowledge than if they are just walking into an introduction class.
That makes sense.
Did I answer your question? The question you asked is so nebulous for me, only because, only because it depends on my target, right? It's like having 30 kids in your classroom, and every one of them needs something different, and you build what they need.
Yeah, and that's like, you did give us a bunch of insights. Like, I think that's super interesting, and it does help quite a bit. But, again, if I may, and if you have it, like, some people just say, well, it depends where I start, and then I sort of take it from there. But is there, like you say, well, I'm going to do, class where I discuss this and that, and I want to implement some form of gamification and or games-based learning. How would you
Right.
even start? Like, what is the first thing that you do? Like,
Oh,
understand your
okay.
audience, and then,
Right.
I don't know.
Which is
How does it
so
look
let
like?
me give you can I give you a real life example?
Sure.
I have been tasked with teaching a climate science class for non-scientists through Whitworth University. I start the class in 2 weeks. So I want to implement game-based learning with them, right? So where I start is climate science, because that's the topic, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not shooting in the dark. So now, because I do all this climate science stuff at the state level, I know a few things about games in climate science, right? Lindsay Trope out of Buffalo, we have contracted with her, and she has created sandboxes and given us, sold us licenses so that we can work with her product, which is, by the way, phenomenal, because she does a lot of work around climate science in games. And the cool thing about Lindsay is she started it from the ground up with NGSS. So she has built these games. So what I'm saying is, when I look at creating a syllabus for these people, first of all, I know they're non-scientists, but that doesn't tell me really anything, because they're not science people, because I teach science methods for universities as well. Just because they're not scientists doesn't mean they don't know a whole lot about the topic if they're that interested to take the class. Does that make sense?
Of course.
So I start with, okay, what are the big picture things I want them to learn? And now I'm going to implement into those niches in order for them to subtly learn what I'm talking about, right? And if I can't find a game that works, then I create a game that works, if that makes
Beautiful.
sense.
Yes, of course. Makes a lot of sense. Thanks for those insights, Tammie. Just a quick break before we continue. Are you enjoying this podcast? If you're listening through a podcasting app, please subscribe and rate us on the app. This will be of great help to reach more engagers so we can change the world together through gamification. And Tammie,
Yeah.
what would you say something like when you are about to use a game in the classroom, or when you're going to implement a gamified system for a classroom, again, a classroom being professional development as much as it could be where your students'
Sure.
classroom and the kids, would you say that there's some sort of best practice, something that, would make your project, your idea, your implementation a little bit better?
The answer to that is yes. And if you want to hear what I think that is,
Please.
I'm going to tell you. So I always say to teachers whenever you're implementing a game, please make it flexible, is maybe the word I want, or malleable, because let me tell you, the people you are playing the game for, they know themselves better than you know them, no matter what. And they're going to have ideas as they're playing the game, right? And please listen. That's what I would call best practice. Please listen. So I would implement a game with students. And the kids, what I love about middle schoolers is they'll just tell you what they think. They'll just tell you. And I love that, because we'd be playing a game and the kids would be like, Ms. Schrader, this would be a lot better if you added XYZ. And it could be anything XYZ. It doesn't even matter. And they knew me well enough to know I'd go, okay, well, then implement that game learning thing, right? Kids know what is fun for them, and adults the same. Oh my gosh, I was doing a game-based learning workshop with about 30 teachers. This is before COVID, and we're face-to-face. And oh my gosh, teachers we were playing this game. And by the way, it was an easy game. It was like sort the cards or something. We were not launching the shuttle at all.
No space science. No
space science. And the purpose of the workshop was to teach about games in classrooms, right? And how to use them. So these adults, they didn't even they just started implementing some of their own rules. It was hilarious. And then, of course, the other teams were like, hey, they're cheating. And it was crazy fun, right? Because then other teams were like, well, if they can do that, we should be able, the lesson was about how to create games. It was not about, can you follow my rules, right? and it right? Because that's a different scenario. And I have to tell you, we had the most fun, and they were just like, all of them implemented their own brand of whatever. And that became what the lesson was about, right? Because, not to be rude, when you create a game for learning, it's not about the game. It's about the learning. And it's about getting people interacting with the learning. And what I loved about that experience, in fact, I was laughing so hard at one point, I'm standing up at the front, because the teams are just what I call cheating, but I used to tell kids, if you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough, And when COVID hit, when I was doing a PD, and I had teachers say, well, yeah, Mrs. Schrader, but what if the kids will cheat if we give them assignments to do at home? And I said, if your kids are cheating on an assignment and they can copy each other, you're not asking the right questions. We don't need to ask questions that kids can look up on a phone in 5 seconds. I mean, maybe they need that information, but that's not the kind of questions we should be asking kids. Good Lord, we should be asking kids how to solve climate science. And man, if you can find that in a book, please let me know. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, so
to think
anyway,
in general.
Yeah. Let's just, I just want kids to think. And that's the one thing I think that games do better than almost anything else, because kids will interact with them fearlessly, right? They're just fearless. And that's not true when I teach science labs or whatever. They think there's a right answer. They think they have to get to it. And to educate kids out of that model of thinking is hard. It was the hardest thing I think I ever faced in a classroom.
Makes sense. It's asking people, not just getting, but asking people to memorize something is kind of comparatively
Worthless.
easier than asking them to actually interpret and think about things, which require sort of higher thinking, right?
Yeah, and here's my plug. When I get teachers that they need to memorize those formulas, I just smile and I think, when you're out in the real world trying to build space shuttles, they don't ask you to memorize anything. They have you double check it, triple check it, and 6 people are standing there collaborating, all checking it, right? You don't memorize stuff. It's not even a smart way to use your brain, I don't think. Gosh, and I just said that on a recording. Oh, well. But okay. But do you know what I'm saying? Why would we bother to have kids waste space on that? Or anybody, And I don't think kids memorizing formulas is helpful. I don't think it's bad to expose them to them. I don't think it's bad to say, you know what, if you're out in the field and you're looking for the area or the volume or whatever, you may want to know this stuff. But to have them waste their space to memorize it I just think it's not valuable.
Not as useful as many other things, for sure.
Not as useful as application.
Yeah, for sure. So, yes, you said it out loud. Yes, you said it on this recording, and the engagers will be with you. Memorizing is I mean, it is useful for many things. I'm not going to say it's useless.
Exactly.
But having school revolve around memorization and university and I'm not sure we're getting to the right place. Lawyers need to memorize many things so that it sort of comes to mind easier. But I'm not sure if memorizing is the exact thing that they're used to. I do remember, not with a lot of love, having teachers and even professors saying you need to answer here not only the right answer, but where, in which page, what paragraph you found it on. It would be found on the book. It's
total waste of time.
Well, what if the edition I had was the next one or the previous one? Why would it be relevant for me to look for that? In a month's time? I'm not going to say in 10 years' time. In a month's time, how is the paragraph, line, and the page going to help me in anything? So. I'm with you.
We have cell phones that will look the stuff up.
Yeah, and tell us what the line, paragraph, and page was.
Yeah, right? It will, right?
If you need it, but since you don't, it's probably not going to tell you ever. Basically, because we don't need it. But yes, I'm definitely there with you, Tammie. I think memorization has its place, but it's not what school needs to be about, for sure. And talking about, recommending people to do this or that, what would you say is a person, if he or she comes to mind, of course, that comes to mind when, you would recommend the engagers, you should listen to this person. And of course, hopefully we'll be able to bring that person to Professor Gain.
I have a lot of people I love listening to. So I have a list, but one of my favorites is Tracy Fullerton at USC, created a game called Walden. I love listening to Tracy. She's passionate. She's, you know what I mean? And she has a lot of helpful hints. And she's been doing this a long, long time. Jane McGonigal is another person that I just love listening to.
Jane, yes. We need to have her on.
Yeah, she is a rock star. Can I say that out loud? And she's got a new book coming out next week. And I'm not trying to plug anything for Jane, but I'm counting the days till it releases. I ordered it 6 months ago, right? I know. So I'm sorry. And I don't but if you're going to ask me the question, I'm going to tell you these people are Constance Steinkuhler. If you've ever heard of her and met her and her husband,
No.
Kurt Squire,
It's the first one you mentioned I hadn't heard of.
Oh, they created a program out of the University of Wisconsin. And since then they've moved to Irvine. I don't know what the name of that university is there, but they're actually holding a conference. They used to hold the conference in Wisconsin. They've now moved it to Irvine. She has done a whole lot of research, and it's just interesting to listen to her talk about what she's learned around working with kids. I'm sure you've heard of James G.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. And I don't, oh my gosh, I got to see him speak at a conference in Wisconsin when the conference was held there at the University of Wisconsin, but I could listen to him all day. And what I love about James is that he takes this into not just education, but politics and everything, right? And he's just powerful. Plus, I think he is just brilliant, of course. And then two more. Can I give you two more? Is this?
Well, it's a you're in a streak, so I'm not going to stop it.
Okay, thanks. When you asked that question, I just thought, I don't know how many you want, but I mean, there's so many people, but Bron Stuckey out of Australia doing the research on Minecraft is amazing. And so you have heard of her. Good.
I actually met her, I think it was a couple of years ago, last time we were in Orlando in the conference Serious Play. I met her there, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
She has a lot of really strong opinions about women in any field, right? And how to move that needle. And she's just so captivating when she talks. I love it. And I love her accent too, right? Because she's from Australia. And then I know it's just pleasant to listen to her. And plus she's brilliant. Like, oh my gosh. And then the other one would be Dan White. I don't know if you know Dan White out of
I think I've heard of Dan, Games. But I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. Like he is always cutting edge, and I don't want to, but they just partnered, Filament Games just partnered with First Lego League because Filament Games created a game on how to build a robot. It's a game and you play it online and you build robots to do certain tasks. And they did this big challenge, and they have just partnered with First Lego League, which is a big deal in Washington State. And they have partnered to become like the pre-competition is building. Anyway, they had all these countries that participated and built these games online. And that really solved a problem during COVID for us, right? Because we were having a problem, right? Anyway, he's just a forward thinker and always doing out of the box stuff. And it's just amazing. So I'll stop there.
We actually had Dan Norton of Filament Games a while ago as well.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay, so Dan and Alex, they started that company. And Dan Norton is great too. I didn't mean to not, he's amazing. But they all are right in there doing that work. For sure. And talking about recommendations, keeping on that streak, and you already mentioned a book that's coming up, but you haven't read it, so we can kind of not still recommend it because we don't know really what's in there. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. But is there any book that you recommend this audience, the Engagers, and of course, why? I guess when I started along this path, and this is after I started, like, not to be rude, but when I started working with games and kids, I didn't know there was a whole community out here doing this work. I mean, I have now like bookshelves full of books on games and whatever, but one of my favorites is Matt Farber. And I'm sorry, I'm looking around at my workspace and I can't find the book. But it's Matt Farber, and he talks about Gamify Your Classroom, I think it is. I think that's the name of and then Reality is Broken by Jane McGonigal was the first book I ever read, and it was just extremely powerful. Yeah, definitely. The narrative by Jane is definitely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So thanks for those recommendations, Tammie. Very, very good books as well. Very good authors, indeed. Yes. Can I tell you that I got to talk to a gentleman last week? His name is Dr. Paul DeVarcy. He's out of Canada. I want to say, do you know Paul? I would love to see you interview Paul. We've had him a couple of times on the podcast. Okay. Indeed. Yes, he just relatively recently created his own company with a partner from Mexico as well. Yes. Yeah. So he actually did an interview with Jane last week on her book. So I haven't read her new book, but he has, because he got to ask her questions and interview her. So I just want you to know that he said, I can't wait for you to read it, Tammie. And of course, he couldn't tell me anything about it, right? Because it hasn't been released. And by the way, Matt Farber's book is Gamify Your Classroom. I just looked it up. Thank you.
Yep.
But he did say the new book is just exceptional. So even though I haven't read it, he's read it.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So what would you say, again, keeping sort of in that recommendation streak, but now looking towards yourself, what would you say, Tammie, in this world of games and gamification, games-based learning, what would you say is your superpower, that sweet spot, that thing that you do at least better than most other people?
No, I was with you all the way up to better than most people. You know what? Because the truth is, I don't know that I do anything better than most people. One of the things that I know that I do well, okay, so I'm just going to say I do it well. I don't know that I do it better than most people, is connective tissue. I do that really well. I have been told by my participants that I'm very engaging when I do PD, so I know I do that well. And of course, we can always do better, right? But the other thing that I really think is one of my superpowers is that I tend to play in a lot of arenas, so I can connect a lot of the dots. So I used to work on a state board called the Professional Educator Standards Board as a board member. And what they do is they set policy throughout the state. So how do I say this without sounding arrogant? Because I don't feel arrogant. I just feel like my job is to serve students, right? That's my job. But One of the things that I know has been really powerful is the state right now, the State Board of Education, is working on something called mastery-based learning, right? And what that means is problem-based learning and those kind of things, right? So not in the box thinking. And they ran a grant, and I got to sit on the team of people that, looked at the schools that they were going to award and also look at the people they were going to contract for that. And so one of the people that I connect with regularly now because of that work is a woman called Senator Lisa Wellman she's the head in our legislature. She's the head of the education committee, right, for the state.
Sure.
And so one of the things that I get to do now, because she is amazing, she's just this rock star, is she thinks outside the box like I do. And one of the things that I get to do and have been blessed to be able to do is she and I have regular conversations about how to implement games and why we implement games and why we look to the next thing and why we should be letting kids drive buses around work, right? Not actual buses, but like they should be driving like, oh my God, all of a sudden I realized that might have sounded like, but why aren't we letting kids have a say in how they're best learning and what they're doing? So I get to do a lot of work with her. And like I said, she's on the cutting edge all the time. And then I get to work with Washington Education Association. So networking and putting things together and putting people together that can create great work, I think that's something I do well. I don't know that I do it better than anyone else. I just think I do it well.
That sounds definitely like a superpower. And you probably do it better than most other people in the world because, I've heard on a podcast many times, and this was a guy who started to study law. And apparently in U.S. courts, you are an expert on the subject matter if you know more than the rest of the people in the room. And I'm pretty sure you can fill quite a few rooms with the people you know more about this than them, or at least do it better. So I definitely think you're an expert. You definitely think you do it better than most other people. So congrats on that superpower you have, Tammie, for sure. And now that we've sort of discussed that you didn't used to play games, you started to learn a little bit. What would you say is your favorite game, Tammie?
Oh my gosh. I have a lot. In fact, we just had to buy shelving in my house because I play board games. So one of my favorite and my husband's like, you never do anything part way. You just go all out. So now we have shelves of these games, right? Because I'm really interested in looking at them in an educational way. So if you've never played, I'm going to just tell you, if you're asking me my favorite apps on the phone or my favorite board game or my favorite game to play on Steam, there are different answers. One of my favorite board games is called Wingspan, and it teaches, oh gosh, I can't even describe this. Wingspan is so good. And the person who designed it and built it was somebody who loved birds, and I love birds, so it speaks to me, right? But it's all about, reproduction and survival, and there's all these other science concepts, but it's just so good.
Sounds fantastic.
One of my favorite apps on my phone, I play a lot of a game called Toy Something, and what's really interesting is I've never understood why I played that game until I read some research, because I am working on my doctorate around this. And by the way, can I make a plug for Gonzaga University? Because
Go ahead.
Not to be rude, they just won yesterday and we're in the Sweet 16. So I just am really excited. But one of the things that I think is fabulous is I was reading research on it and why people choose games they choose, especially around what I call mindless games, which doesn't sound very kind, but I play this game where you just have to match things and blah, blah, blah. And it talked about why your brain loves those games and what you get out of them and how it engages different pieces of your brain in order to clear the way for other things that you spend time working on or doing, right? So my husband, who will not be happy that I am talking about him, he loves to play, he loves to play word games. And that makes me, because he doesn't really love words, that's not his superpower, but he loves to play word games. And so we play them together, and and I said to him, I'm just shocked that you download word games. And to this day, but then I read the research on why he might be doing that. Right. And how that engages a different part of his brain than it does when he's at work or doing other things, because he's a very hands-on person. But if you ask me what my favorite game to play on, well, I do like Animal Crossing, but I tend to play games on Steam that are really popular, because if they're popular, that means that at some point we're going to need to leverage them with kids, right? So of course, Minecraft. And can I just talk about failure? Minecraft, I had to actually, I don't know if you've heard of Stephen Reed out of Scotland. He actually mentors me. And Stephen Reed has gone all over the world. He's another person you should get to talk, because he is awesome. And he does work all over the world, right? And he now works for Microsoft, because they recruited him intelligently enough, because he does all this work with Minecraft. I mean, he does esports in Minecraft, and he's just amazing. But anyway, he is actually tutoring me and mentoring me on how to play Minecraft, and he's got his work cut out for him. Let me just tell you, and I've asked kids a million times, seriously, I struggle with Minecraft, and only because it's not my superpower, right? But I ask kids all the time, why do you play this? What is it about this? And every single one of them, creativity. We can do whatever we want, and there are no boundaries, and there's no, you know what I mean? And I think, okay, so that's what kids are telling us, so we need to be listening to that. So I'll finish there. Thank you for asking me what I play.
There you go. Quite a few things that you're playing, Tammie, for sure. And before we let you go, before we take off, would you tell us, if you have any quick final words, and of course, where we can find more about what you're doing in this world?
Oh, where you? Oh man, I don't know where you can find more. More about. I do have a Twitter account, right? Tammie Schrader.
There you go.
I'm not always whatever. I have a LinkedIn account. I mean, you can find out more about what I do there. We're also publishing on the WEA workspace when I work for them. There, we have an ESD website that will show some of the work we're doing. And you asked me what was the question? What?
If you have any final advice, any final words in general, if there's anything you didn't mention that you'd like to put in.
So I can't say this enough, and I probably already said it, but I'm going to say it again. So I have a colleague who said to me, other than modeling, I don't really understand the value of this game stuff. I mean, I get that we can model stuff, for kids in Minecraft or whatever he said. But other than that, we can find other ways to model for them. And I said, yeah, we can. But here's the thing. We don't get to choose what motivates kids. We don't get to choose what motivates anybody. So here's the thing. It's not our world anymore. It's not ours. Our generation is I get that we, can still contribute and whatever, but we don't get to drive the bus anymore. Kids are driving the bus. And if this is the thing that works for them and speaks to them, we have to be able to relate to them in a way that they choose, right? I took up texting, not because I love texting. I remember when texting came out, on a phone, And I thought, well, this is the silliest thing I've ever heard. And just call the person, right? But I mean, that's how I felt. But my daughters were teenagers and they were getting ready to leave, graduate and leave. And I thought, here's the thing. I don't get a vote anymore, right? If texting is how they communicate, then I need to join their world. They don't need to join mine. Right? And so I think the thing I think is most powerful is you don't get to pick what motivates kids. So we need to join their world. And let me tell you something, games are their world. And not to be rude, I think games are the adult world. But somewhere along the line, we forgot that education could be fun. It's almost like a swear word in education, because when I do workshops, people go, well, this is fun. And I'm like, when did we have to stop being fun? And in fact, if you look at the research as a science person, we learn better if we're having fun. God forbid, right? I mean, so why aren't we making it fun? And that's my final word.
There you go. Final words. Thank you very much, Tammie. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for investing this time from the west coast of the U.S. to all the way down to Madrid over here where Professor Game's headquarters are based. Thank you for doing all of that, for investing that time, sharing all of your knowledge, your experience, your ups and your downs, all the way, all the recommendations as well that we got today. However, Tammie, Engagers, at least for now and for today, it is time to say that it's game over. Hey, Engagers, thank you for listening to the Professor Game podcast. And remember, if you want more interviews with amazing guests like Tammie, go to professorgame.com/subscribe and get started on our email list for free. That way we can be in contact. You can reply to those emails. We can be sending you interesting information about the world of gamification education and the world of Professor Game for sure. So before you go on to your next mission, remember to also, perhaps if you want, subscribe or follow for free using your favorite podcast app, the one that you're using, hopefully, to listen to this podcast. And then you will be able to listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.